of the Apollo 8 mission. So this is the lead-in into December 1968. Apollo had not been very successful. Several failures, several cancellations. Critical systems were not yet in place. There really wasn't a system in place for the recovery, for the communications system. Even launch control and mission control weren't quite finished yet. And going to the moon was a whole different ballgame than just going into Earth orbit. There was, on their ship, on the command module, this one rocket that had not successfully in the Apollo 6 had failed. Not only did they need this rocket to get out of Earth orbit and on the way to the moon, they needed to fire it again when they got to the moon to put them into lunar orbit. They needed to fire it again to get out of lunar orbit and come back to Earth, and then again to have a successful aim their re-entry. There were course corrections along the way, so all in all, they were going to have to relight this engine 5, 6, 7 times. And the two critical ones, to be captured by the moon, was going to happen on the far side of the moon. We've never sent people. No people had ever launched on a Saturn V. Their first trip on a Saturn V, sent them to the moon. So kind of an amazing leap in just a couple months. NASA administrators knew that with all of these risks, that they would be in orbit on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. There was a lot riding on this mission. And it wasn't just for NASA, and it wasn't just for the Soviet-American tensions. It was also because of the state of the sort of psychological state and emotional state of the nation. 1968 was an exceptionally difficult year. The Vietnam War was in full swing. The Tet Offensive was in the beginning of that year. There were 2 assassinations, Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, both assassinated that year. Some of you might remember the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, where clashes between protesters and police were severe. Vietnam War protests were at their height. There was a serious arms race going on and the threat of nuclear annihilation between the superpowers. It was a very, very grim year. So we're leading into the end of this year. We're about to send some people to the moon, and with, I don't want to call it a wing and a prayer, but it was daring to send them on this mission. So that leads us to Apollo 8, this mission that we're commemorating 50 years ago. So these are the 3 very brave individuals who are the first to leave our world completely. Others had gone into orbit, but none had left Earth. So we have Frank Borman on the left, William Anders in the back, and on the right, Jim Lovell. So there we are, morning of. Frank Borman's getting ready, Commander Borman, and out they go, looking like the canonical spacemen.
3, 2, 1. 0. We have commit. We have liftoff.
Oh, and there's the rumble in our building.
There's the rumble.
It looks good. It looks like a good flight.
Some of the most canonical Apollo launch shots you've ever seen are actually of Apollo 8 taking off. Absolutely beautiful. So they circle the Earth and they get the command.
Go ahead, Houston. Apollo 8, you are go for TLI. Over. Roger, understand. We're go for TLI.
TLI, translunar injection. So we're sending people for the first time away from Earth. So here's a little montage of a sequence of shots that they took as the mission went further and further from Earth. And I can only encourage you to go online and hear the astronauts speak in their own words of the experience of leaving the Earth and watching it shrink, shrink, shrink until you can just cover it with your thumb. So then they turned around, okay, goodbye Earth, and pointed a picture toward the moon. Hello, moon. And so now this is going to be very hard to hear, but remember I said they have to get captured on the back side. So they're about to go into the shadow behind the moon. We're not going to hear back from them. We have to wait almost an hour to see if it's successful.
Apollo 8, Houston, 1 minute to LOS, all systems go. All right, how you're going? Flat trips. We'll see you on the other side.
So So that's the key. We'll see you on the other side. So, that's also the quality of the communications, right? I can't stress enough how 50 years ago, anyway, you get the picture. Short version is they came out of the other side successfully. The burn was successful. These are some of the pictures.
And just to mention, the side of the moon people had not seen with their whole eyes in all of history, only in pictures.
That's right. And they had 10 orbits around the moon. So the first two, they were taking a bunch of pictures, looking to try to understand the nature of the potential landing spots for the future landing of humans on the moon, and also just to get pictures of the surface of the moon close up and at resolutions no one had ever seen before. Now, at the end of the third orbit, they made a maneuver. Colonel Borman, the commander, says...
We're going to roll.
So they're on...
Oh my God, look at that picture over there. There's the Earth coming up. Wow, is that pretty. Hey, don't take that, it's not scheduled. You got a color film, Jim? Bill, I got a phrase that's very clear right here.
Okay, I don't know if you could hear what he said. It's like, wow, look at that, that's beautiful. They said, are we allowed to take that picture? Oh no, you can't take that picture, it's not scheduled. And that picture was this picture. So, I know. You can hear Anders' excitement, and Lovell's going, oh my gosh, they're both so excited. The commander is not able to see it quite yet. Of course, it's film, not digital, brought back to Earth, and after it was developed and put out came this iconic picture, which when you rotate on its side is the well-known Earthrise image. I'm going to have a hard time not getting choked up. I am. I'm just going to say that now. Because I can't tell you what it was like to see this view at a time when the Earth was in such turmoil. And no one had ever seen anything like this. It made an enormous difference. It made a difference to people all over the world. And some would say that this image really kicked off the conservation movement of the 70s, the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, the passage of so many laws to protect this beautiful blue gem that people saw not only for the first time like this, but with the contrast of the dead, gray, lifeless moon in front and that absolutely breathtaking jewel of a planet that we live on in the background. So at this point, frankly, the crew was exhausted. They had been traveling for 3 days. They hadn't had much sleep. They were starting to get a little loopy, weren't quite functioning, weren't quite understanding or speaking clearly. And the colonel said, Borman said, we're not going to do any more work. We're all, it's nap time. And they took, and Anders and Lovell were like, no, we want to look at this more. And he commanded them to take a nap for 2 hours, which for 2 orbits, which is 4 hours. So they rotated. They each took some sleep so that they could be, conscious and safe and ready for the big thing, which was on their last of the 10 orbits, the firing of the rocket that would bring them home. Again, this rocket that had failed so many times before, or failed so terribly before. So just before they go in for their last pass, again, to go into radio silence, they wish the people of Earth a Merry Christmas. And I'm going to play this to you. It's famous. I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's sort of long, but you will certainly recognize it. I read an account from Borman about the selection of the text because it comes from the Bible, and he said they recognized at the time that Christianity was a minority religion on Earth. But it was Old Testament, and because of the roots of all of the of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity in the Old Testament, some of the historical traces, they felt that it was inclusive enough. So we show this here from a historical perspective, and I'll just play the beginning of that of their farewell, their last audio transmission and television transmission to us, just before they go behind the moon for their final burn.
We Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light.
So they completed the passage from Genesis. All three astronauts read. And then just before they went into radio silence, they said this.
And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
I think I'm going to stop there. I can't stop there. They have to come home. What am I talking about? Anyway, so they came around the backside, and they're waiting for a connection to hear from the backside. And so the astronauts, as you were telling me today, you heard a little bit of something, and they wanted to know, Mission Control wanted to know about the burn. Was the burn successful? Did it go as long as we needed to bring them home safely?
Right, because if it didn't burn for 3 minutes and 23 seconds, they might have trouble getting back. So basically, they had a lot of trouble communicating, and finally through the static, they said, "Can you tell us about the burn?" And I believe it was Level talking, said, "Oh, it was 2 minutes, 23 seconds." And the other side, silence. Said, "Can you read back the burn again?" Said, 2 minutes, 23 seconds. And, well, if that was true, we wouldn't be hearing from them much longer. So, can you check your numbers? And then he says, 3 minutes, 23 seconds. So,
And after that, when the good news, then this is the part of the recording we do have.
Houston, Apollo 8, over. Hello, Apollo 8. Loud and clear. Roger. Please be informed there is a Santa Claus. That's affirmative. You're the best ones to know.
You're the best ones to know. So yes, they were pretty happy. They came home. Their families were quite happy. I know. And of course, by the end of the year, that's the recognition they got. That's a lovely note to end, and so we here wish you as they wished us then.
God bless all of you on